We will now call the Special Education Advisory Committee meeting on March 10th to order. We will begin with Dr. Fagenbush calling roll.
Dr. Como,
Present.
Ms. August, Ms. Bartow,
Present.
Ms. Jack, Ms. Jameson, Ms. Collins-Lanslin, Ms. Lee, she's present, she just stepped out. Mr. Price? Thank you. And Dr. Price?
Present.
We have a quorum.
Moving on to the next item, we will have the approval of the minutes from the February 3rd, 2025 meeting. Can I get a motion?
I make a motion.
The minutes of the February 3rd, 2025 Special Education Advisory Committee meeting has been approved. New business, item number 1, we will have a presentation on social emotional learning by Mr. Ricardo Rosado.
Good afternoon, everybody. Turn this on. All right. Yeah, it's red. It's red. Good afternoon. My name's Ricardo Rosado, school psychologist for the district. And initially, in spring of 2024, I did this presentation. It was about an hour and 45 minutes. So I will streamline it down to less than 20 or 20 minutes for y'all, just to hit the high notes. Ms. Deborah asked me to talk to you guys about this. So I have a PowerPoint. I have some papers too. I'm not going to cover every one of these slides, although I did streamline it from that, but I recognize that I can make it even a little shorter. So what we'll talk about today, this is on. Yeah, great, perfect. What do you have? And I guess I should hand these out. It might make it better for you. Go ahead. Should have enough. Here's a few more. There you go. So I'll talk about what trauma is, just a quick definition. There are tons of different definitions for trauma. You name the organization and they'll come out with a definition. But the one I used was, the one I want to use today with you guys is from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Service Administration. And ideally, what they coined trauma to be is an emotional or physical response. So our response to one or more physically harmful or life-threatening events or circumstances that has a lasting effect on us. What they say is that it can be witnessed firsthand, but it also can be something that it happened to someone else. So maybe a mother or brother, family member, or you heard about it, or it's happening to someone else that you see. They kind of pull away from like watching scary movies or watching television or things like that. Those do have impacts on us. My son talked about that the other night. He's about to be 18 and was kind of afraid to go to sleep after watching a scary show he shouldn't have saw. But the reality is those things do impact us, but those aren't included in this definition. This definition just opens the idea that a lot of our students are faced with trauma, and we need to address that. They say that the current psychiatric, you can flip it if you want, the current psychiatric way we define kids really doesn't even cover all aspects of everything they're experiencing. What they really look at is what their behaviors are, and so that's how they classify students or diagnose students based on their trauma. Can you flip it one more time? So I'll read to you, I know you've seen these, but I'll just read to you the most common, what they consider to be complex trauma for students or even humans. Post-traumatic stress disorder, I know you've heard of that. Depression, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, oppositional defiant disorder, conduct disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, There's something called separation anxiety disorder, and then reactive attachment disorder, and that's the inability to establish like a relationship with someone, someone who doesn't have emotions or sympathy for others. So that's what that is. Those are the normal or the most prevalent classifications or diagnoses that are given to kids that are experiencing trauma. So that led to, that information in the presentation led to many other avenues that I went down, but I'm just going to streamline it and get you to this major study. There was a study done in 1995 by the CDC. It was called the ACEs study. And basically, ACEs stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. And they looked at those experiences, and what they did with this study is they took 17,000 adults, ranging from 18 years of life on up, and they basically asked them a couple of questions, a survey. The survey looked at these kinds of things. Have you had any adverse childhood experiences? And they listed them, and these are what they were. Witnessing violence in home or community, attempt or success of a family member to commit or to have suicide, household with substance abuse problems, prevalent substance abuse problems, households with mental health problems that were never addressed, instability due to household members being incarcerated. So maybe dad gets incarcerated and now the family's suffering with low income. Instability due to parental separation or divorce. Failure to have basic needs met, food and medication, things like that. Experiencing homelessness or unstable housing. Those were the main adverse childhood experiences that they interviewed these 17,000 individuals. And what they did is they looked at how many of those experiences an individual may have had and their current health and their current status in life. So it was a correlational study. It definitely wasn't something that if this happens to you, this is definitely going to happen to you. But it definitely says if these things are present in your life, there are always those individuals that can overcome anything. But for the most part, most individuals tend to have problems later on in life. The ACEs study came out with this. You can flip it. And it basically said that about 64% of United States adults reported they had experienced at least one type of ACE before the age of 18. The impact of this study is that 1 in 5 high school students reported experiencing at least 4 or more. And then the most common adverse childhood experiences that are met by high school students were emotional abuse, physical abuse, living in a home with poor mental health, and substance abuse. So those truly impacted students. ACEs can have a lasting effect on health and well-being in childhood and life opportunities. So your education and your job potential. That's what the correlational study showed. Makes sense. Makes sense. You're having to overcome even more. The main thing from this study was this. Everybody has stress, but what they're saying is these childhood adverse stressors created something called toxic stress, and it actually created changes in the brain. Part of the initial presentation looked at the different types of brain structure and how it impacted it. I'm not going to bore you with that today, but it did affect biologically or the way that the brain functioned. And so the impact of toxic stress can affect these things. This is not what you want in a classroom. Attention, decision-making, learning, and the formation of healthy and stable relationships. So that's why this study was so important, because that toxic stress, if it isn't addressed, affects everything we're trying to do in the district. The good news they found is that although it does have changes in the brain, if you treat it, these changes aren't permanent. They can be changed. Particularly when the children experience safe and stable supportive environments. So I know a lot of us don't believe in foster homes or other things like that, but I guess that's where they got a lot of their data from. Students that were maybe removed from that toxic, stressed environment and moved into an environment where there was stability and some type of relationship, they were able to change those aspects of their brain chemistry. And this information was taken from Stress and Development Lab at the University of Washington. I didn't create this. A lot of this information I gleaned from resources to present to you guys. So what can we do to help? And that's kind of what the presentation is. And I'm going to say a few things, and I'm going to jump back into social emotional learning. But what can we do to help? And a lot of these are, yeah, I know that. It's a gimme. But if you don't think about them, sometimes we overlook them. What can we do to help these kinds of, or to address toxic stress? Ensure the environment is and feels safe as possible. We could do these at schools. Create a safety plan for situations where there may be perceived dangers. Identify safe places, safe people. What do I do in this particular situation? Caregivers can provide support and reassurance. A lot of times those caregivers need support and reassurance and support. Teach and support the development of coping and social skills. That's a big one. So work with kids all the time, and there are many of them that just don't have the coping skills, their ability to understand, okay, how do I manage this situation? Shoot, I can't curse in here, but shoot, I run into a lot of adults like that. Help them face up to non-dangerous situations. So they may be truly afraid of a major issue, but there may be some safe issues they can kind of address just to build confidence so that they can move toward and that typically has a lot to do with domestic violence. If necessary, connect necessary community support services, mental health services, and cognitive behavioral therapy to families. So that's kind of the ideal of stress and toxic stress, and the study, the ACEs study. I kind of want to move now into something called trauma-informed education. And this is kind of where we push to put this into education and into educators' mindset. And it's the idea of this. I'll read it to you so I don't get it wrong. Making an effort to understand the impact trauma has on students will help to create a mindset shift focused on providing a structure to support students, faculty, and staff in creating a learning environment that fosters resilience. Bunch of big words to say this. There is nothing more important and more profound than establishing positive human relationships between staff, teachers, students, and the community and the individuals that go in and out of the school system. That is the number one finding of all the studies, is that positive human relationships is really what helps people to overcome. So the ideal is this, is teachers aren't therapists. We don't expect teachers to be therapists and to do counseling. That's inappropriate. They're not trained for it. They don't have time for it. But what they can do is they can support students across all settings, not just in the classroom. Having that relationship in the hallway, before school starts, after school, at activities, that positive relationship. Show compassion rather than a judgmental approach. Easier said than done, but that's something that's very important. No one loves to be judged. I stopped by my parents' house. They're 94, 92. I stopped by there several times each week. And I always tell myself, okay, my mom's gonna say I gained weight. They're gonna argue a little bit about the sky color and some other things, and fuss me that my dad's trying to make me eat. So the reality is that show compassion for that rather than judgment. I can get frustrated, mad, and leave, but the reality is I know I'm going to be facing that. Same thing with teachers and their students in their classroom. You know, little Johnny, little Sally may have some issues. You know it. They smell it. They come with it. You see it. And rather than writing referral and being judgmental, he didn't do this or she did that, the understanding of establishing that relationship and trying to help that child through that issue. Referrals I've yet to see solve any issues, solve any problems. They just create more problems. Use restorative practices like circle time. That's more for like elementary, where they sit the kids around in a circle and they have like a talking mechanism, so everybody gets an opportunity to talk. How was your day? What do you like? What's your favorite color? Whatever. It's establishing and building community. That's kind of what that's some of the things that they can do in restorative practices. For junior and high school, they talk about advisory committees where these individuals, the same thing, they circle up and they talk, but it's more like an advisory type of situation or scenario. I have many more things in your handout here, but the idea is that teachers also need to be mindful of what they bring to the table. The whole idea of what I do affects you and what you do affects me. So sometimes all of us come to work or get in a situation where we may not be in our best, wearing our Sunday's best. And so the reality is when we bring stuff to the table, it gets looked at. Sometimes it gets digested. So kids bring stuff and staff bring things. And this whole idea of trauma-informed education is that the staff members and the educators recognize these things and don't pick up that gauntlet. That leads to something called social-emotional learning. And it's not a new term. It's been around for quite a while. It's been around since 1968, before I was even born. There's a guy, Dr. James Comer at Yale University. He kind of looked at this idea of teaching the whole kid, not just academics. He looked at the whole child, the social and the emotional social skills or skills of that. That kind of, it had its moment, it died away, and then it came back in 1987 through 1992, where other individuals picked it up and started to promote that in K through 12 grade levels. But really in 1994, there was a group of researchers, educators, practitioners like myself, and then child advocates, of course. They came together and they formed something called CASEL. Most of us, or when you hear CASEL, you think CASEL is social emotional learning, but it really doesn't stand for that. CASEL stands for Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. Most people think CASEL is a person, and it's not. The idea was to establish high quality, evidence-based interventions as a normal part of K through 12th grade. And they looked at areas like this: setting and achieving goals, showing empathy for others, establishing and maintaining positive relationships, that's very important, making responsible decisions, and understanding and managing emotions. That's what we want all for our children. But those are the things we got to teach them. Those are the things we got to struggle through with them. It just doesn't happen. So the whole idea of social emotional learning is the process of working with students or children to get that. It's looking at their social and emotional skill sets and building on those and their activities and practices that do that. One of the things that I talked about in the presentation when I closed it up is that the State Department, anybody from the State Department here? No? I've been around long. I've been in the district, not this district, but I've been in the system for 31 years. And so I can talk about the State Department.
Mr. Rosado, but we are streaming.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. Yeah. No, I won't talk bad. What I'll tell you about the State Department is that many moons ago, they passed several, or they promoted several activities in which we addressed social emotional learning and dealt with toxic stress and those kinds of things. And one of the big ones was positive behavior interventions and supports. We used to have someone at the State Department who actually was responsible for that. That person doesn't even exist anymore. That position doesn't exist. So that's the thing about the State Department is that technique or that strategy really proved very useful in all of Region 3, in Lafourche and St. Mary and many in Terrebonne. It was a very prevalent thing. It still exists and it's still around. In fact, some of the schools in this district, if not most, do PBIS, positive behavior interventions and supports, but it's not as dominant as it used to be. Along with that, the district does do this too. And so I guess my thing for the state would be is that they really need to get back on that and get back in touch with what works. Another thing that's offered in this district, which I'm proud to be part of too, is offering nonviolent crisis intervention, CPI training, certain staff, especially in significant populations. And I'm not sure who else gets it, Deborah, but I know teachers and staff get it. Administration may. But it's strategies and techniques on how to de-escalate crisis situations. That could be anything from an emotional breakdown to someone truly physically being aggressive toward others. So the first part of it really is like verbal de-escalation, how to deal with a problem and de-escalate it. And then the second component is if it gets to a physical part, how to address that physically, how to intervene physically, so we don't hurt the individual, but that we do restrain with that. Another area that's really important that school districts can do is called restorative practices. And once again, I kind of alluded to that when I was talking earlier about circle time and advisory time. It's the ideal of I guess I can use the example of moral dilemmas or problems in the classroom or problems in society or problems in the school. And you have the kids talk about, what do you think about this and how would you solve this problem? So it's a lot of moral dilemma and thinking and reasoning. And then finally, and most importantly too, is connecting families to community supports, mental health, any kind of supports that are out there, counseling that students may need that are undergoing or experiencing toxic stress. I'll leave you with this thought. I stole part of it from Erin Dugan, a PhD. I went to one of her presentations, and she did a presentation on play therapy. But the idea was this. She said, don't try to teach a child to swim when they're drowning. It's never going to happen. They're panicking. They're in the moment. They're in the water. That's not the time to teach them. I added this part myself. I said, once you pull them to the side, we can begin to teach them how to swim or perhaps even how to dog paddle. The reality is this, and I tell people this all the time, you know, when someone's going through a crisis, that's not the moment to try to counsel them. They can't hear you. Their brain is shut down. You got to get them through that crisis, and then you can start treatment or that counseling relationship. If I leave you with anything in this presentation, it would just be this. Relationships, positive relationships with others is the most important antidote to the majority of this information. I hope I did you proud. Thank y'all. All righty.
Mr. Rosado, you mentioned the CPI trainings. Dr. Sanders has been leading that with two of our district personnel. They've been doing a wonderful series of trainings. We probably went through 6 different 2-day trainings recently, where 2 people from every school for each 2 days. So yeah, so we've had quite a bit, but yeah, you're right. It's very helpful. And then PBIS, I agree with you. That's probably one of the most powerful things when we were doing it well. That really worked.
All right, thank you, Mr. Rosado. And yes, we still do PBIS. I'm from Hattie Watts, and we do follow our PBIS. Yeah. And admin did get trained in our CPI because I just went a few weeks ago. So. Okay, moving on. Number 2, we're going to have Ms. McClarity talk about a Special Olympics track meet update.
Good afternoon. I'm excited. It's getting close to our time for Special Olympics. We met today in the office and started our process with our OTs and PTs, and the kids are practicing. Avery said he's been practicing. Thank you. Getting ready for the big day. Our big day is April 4th, 2025 at West St. Mary High School track. I'm asking that everyone come out and support our students. It's going to be a wonderful event, and we're going to pray that day. I'm going to light my candle so that we won't get any rain and have to postpone. Dr. Fagenbush, I think last year we had to postpone 3 times, was it?
But we got them there.
But we got it in, but we had to postpone 3 times. A couple of 3 times, and what was so funny about it, the kids wore their shirts, and then they wanted new shirts. We're gonna hold on to those shirts till the last time this year, so that they won't be disappointed after they wear their shirts. So that is is coming up in April, and I'm excited about it. Another thing that's coming up in April for us, special education has been very busy. On April the 7th, we have our Arts Jam in Franklin at the Tesh Theater, and that's for our younger students from grades 1st grade through 8th grade at 5 o'clock at the Tesh Theater. They will be performing. If you have not been, you need to come and see these wonderful students perform. We had to break it up in 2 days because it was so long, and we all want the parents to come out. So we have our 9th through 12th graders on April the 8th at the theater, beginning at 5 o'clock. So I do have flyers that I would like for you to take. If you notice when you walked in, we have a sign out there for you to see. We put a sign out here, and if you come to my office, we have a sign there as well. And it's also, if you're coming through Franklin, it's on the board. It's on the highlight board to know that it's coming in April. So please come out and support our children. It's wonderful talent here in this district, and the kids need our support. Miss Lee's coming around with the flyer for the Arts Jam. So just take the flyer and pass it around, let everybody know, and bring a friend when you come. You'll see some wonderful kids perform. Thank you.
All right, Ms. McClargy just went over item number 3, which was our St. Mary Parish Arts Jam update. So we're going to move on to item number 4, which is to talk about setting.
Consider 4:30, so people aren't running.
We can. We're going to talk about setting dates and times for next year's special education advisory meetings. So the proposed dates would be Monday, September 15th, Monday, November 17th, and Monday, January 26th. Right now, we meet at 4, but Dr. Fagenbush and I were just discussing a possibility of moving it to 4:30.
4:30 would be much better than 4 o'clock.
Because everyone's
But
coming running.
I'll still mark it down at the office that I have to be out for 4. So that way I will get here in plenty of time.
You want to make a motion?
Yeah, so I need a motion to accept these dates and time.
I'll make a motion to accept the dates and times.
Okay, and a second? Okay, so it looks like our proposed dates will be Monday, September 15th, Monday, November 17th, and Monday, January 26th at 4:30. All right, moving on to item number 5. Do we have any comments from any committee members or attendees?
for each winner, and we would have 3 T-shirts all year through that our board members, when we have different events, parents could buy them, and they would be on display all year. And next year, we'll pick 3 more winners. And that's open for all the St. Mary Parish and our grandparents. Tiffany, are you gonna have the, event on the Bayou side like you do Autism Awareness Month is next month? Are you still gonna have your, that I-10 on the weekend every? This year, we, is doing a spring festival. I know the kids will be out of school. It's gonna be April 17th at 3 p.m. at Petco Park. Hopefully, we're gonna still have the fun zone, have a bubble releasing, ceremony for the kids. The park is pretty, we have East Egg hunt and a sack race. And that's open for all the kids with, autism and their family as well. So we don't leave their siblings out, we invite the whole family to come, and everything is free. Thank you.
I think I was on the whole time. All right, Miss Tiffany, thank you for that information. I do remember your face at some of our meetings, so thank you for attending. Do we have anything else? All right, at this time, I will adjourn the meeting.
Ask for a motion.
Oh, I need a motion.
I motion.
In a second? All right, at this time, the Special Education Advisory Committee meeting for March